Hello from sunny Miami, and welcome to this episode of Crossing Borders with Nathan Lustig, where I have conversations with entrepreneurs doing business across borders and the people who support them, with a focus on those with some connection to Latin America. My guest today is Andres Moreno, founder and CEO of OpenEducation, the parent company of OpenEnglish, NextU, and OpenEnglish Jr. Since Andres and his co-founders started OpenEnglish in an apartment in Caracas, Venezuela in 2007, OpenEnglish has grown into one of the biggest success stories coming out of Latin America, with more than 2,000 employees serving their 500,000 students in 40 countries around the world. They've also raised more than $125 million in venture capital. Andres is extremely well known in Latin America for starring in homemade commercials for OpenEnglish that highlighted funny situations where people pretended to speak English but really didn't. But he may not be as well known in the US, and I hope our conversation highlights his brilliant success story. We cover how Andres lived crossing borders as a kid, following his dad's career around Latin America, how he got started, why he picked Miami as a base, and how he has supported entrepreneurship in Latin America as both an entrepreneur, investor, and mentor to many startups around the region. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Andres Moreno. Hey, Andres, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for taking the time to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here.
No, of course. So where are we in the world today?
Well, here physically, we're in Miami. We're at the actual OpenEducation headquarters in Miami, Florida.
Exactly. So tell me a little bit more about OpenEducation.
Yeah, hey, thanks. So OpenEducation started originally as OpenEnglish. We started the business 10 years ago. And when we started, we created OpenEnglish as a way to create a consumer service for non-native English speakers, basically in emerging markets, with a focus in Latin America, to learn English with native English speakers. And so this platform, which we can talk about, became from very kind of humble garage startup, but from Latin America, grew over the years, and now we renamed it OpenEducation. We have a number of different business verticals that we operate in. OpenEnglish continues to be one of our main verticals, which is our big consumer brand for languages. But we also acquired a company called NextU, it's an online university for digital skills. We have our junior business, like OpenEnglish Jr, which we sell also to our English and language services to kids through live instruction. And we've closed a couple of other acquisitions that are interesting that I can talk more about. But anyway, so that's sort of as a result. I think the company today, we have over 600,000 students that have enrolled in our programs. The company's in 20 countries. It's the leading brand in the region. We did a study last year of 9.5 out of 10 brand awareness and the kind of ABC kind of socioeconomic status in the region. And the company has raised up to 2013-14 to raise about $125 million of capital to expand throughout the region. So we've leveraged that to really kind of build a very kind of commanding position when it comes to edtech in the region.
And where do you see OpenEducation going over the next, say, 1 to 5 years?
Yeah, so we've transitioned from being a one product company to being a portfolio of education technology businesses in the region and in emerging markets. And so I think we'll continue on that path. We're on the one hand, adding new verticals to our portfolio. On the other hand, we're adding new ways to reach consumers. For example, with brands we already had, like OpenEnglish, I mentioned the creation of OpenEnglish Jr. So we want to be really at the center of the household. So I had a lot of parents saying, hey, this is great. I can now speak English. I have an online English teacher on demand, but I'd like to get the same thing for my kids. Or OpenEnglish Enterprise, where we now have over 1,000 companies in the region that have their employees working with us. And so, again, we continue to sort of expand on the brands that we have and get ourselves into new verticals, new businesses that are synergistic or complementary. So I think that's an exciting path for us as we have migrated again from being the leaders in online English in the region to really wanting to be the leaders in digital education in Latin America.
So you mentioned you started in a garage. Where was this garage?
Well, I think the garage and sort of analogy is very, very California, right? But sort of Menlo Parkish. But in our case, it was a student apartment in Caracas, Venezuela. So it was I grew up traveling. My dad was a diplomat, so I was always very passionate about languages. Saw the impact, a positive impact that speaking English in particular could have, not as a language of one country, but as a language of kind of a global communication tool. Once you know it, you can really go anywhere with it. And it certainly was a big part of my success, was being able to speak English like I do, to raise money, to build teams in the U.S., to really be kind of effective cross-border. And so after engineering school, decided to start a company in LatAm where we brought college graduates from the U.S. from Ivy League universities to live in LatAm, and they taught English at Fortune 500 companies that had their LatAm headquarters there. And that was a great product. I mean, the companies loved having these native English speakers walking around the office and talking to their employees. But it was a hard business model to scale, where you had physical people that you had to fly down and house and take care of. And so in 2007, when the internet sort of second wave of it came around, broadband connections and speeds were at a point in Latin America where they could sustain a service like this, and voice over IP again became just pretty prevalent. We started building online classrooms to connect students from their home or office to teachers that didn't have to get on a plane anymore to teach, right? They could do it from home. And that was the sort of the genesis for Open English. But it took me many years to get it off the ground. It was very difficult, very hard to raise money in Latin America. It certainly was very hard 10 years ago. It still is, but certainly at that time, I'm Venezuelan, and imagine a tech company teaching English out of Venezuela was not exactly at the top of sort of the California angel sort of investment thesis. So I had to move. I actually moved to California. Had a buddy that lived in San Francisco. Ended up sleeping on his couch for a year and doing the startup thing. Just going out and meeting investors and telling them the story. And somehow a few believed in the vision and passion, and that led to some other people investing. It took 2 years, but we raised a couple $1 million in angel and seed capital that allowed us then to sort of unlock some bigger rounds down the road as we proved out the product, and then proved out our sort of acquisition strategy for consumers and all that. And so it became a pretty big brand over time.
Were your first investors in the U.S. or were they from Latin America?
They were actually American. Yeah, it's very hard. I think it was very hard to raise money in Latin America. It still is. I think it's better now. But I think there wasn't a lot of, there's obviously capital. Even here in Miami, there was capital in a lot of it, but from family offices, but there just wasn't a culture of investing in early stage. And I think a lot of the family offices didn't know how, or they didn't know what convertible debt with a discount was, and certain things that just were foreign to them. So most of them, if they wanted to invest in something, it would be control, or it would be later stage. And so I think now that's again changed, but back then it was a real challenge. So I had to go to those few places in the U.S. where that was sort of more accepted and understood, and it was a good call, although it definitely stretched us to try to build the product while trying to raise money very far away.
What would be your top 2 or 3 tips that you would give to Latin American entrepreneurs that want to raise money, whether they're in Latin America or want to come to the U.S. to do it?
Well, a few of the things that I've seen is I think important things. One is you really want to have an idea that scales cross-border. Most investors, unless perhaps Brazil is the exception, but outside of Brazil, you really need an idea or a concept that scales regionally, so that the TAM, your total addressable market, is big enough to justify raising venture capital. So I think that's one important point. And if it is, that can be a big market, right? Latin America is a big and expanding region. There's also risk in the region, so you want to, I think the more markets you can cover, I think the more you can sort of hedge that by not depending on one specific market and their currency or whatever else. I think the other important thing that I've seen is just to have a good understanding from early on your pre-user economics. I think that a lot of entrepreneurs think about the product and think about creating the perfect product, this and that, but don't necessarily understand or think about how much it's going to cost to acquire their user, whether it be corporate or whether it be enterprise or consumer, and how that's going to play into the economics of the product. And so, they don't really find out about that or understand that investors are worried about that till they start raising money. I think there is still this concept that you need to be profitable at the consolidated level, and that's the most important thing. Whereas, VCs don't want you to be profitable; they just want you to have healthy per-user economics, and you can burn cash as long as you're growing quickly, as long as you have, those per-user economics are healthy. So I think that's another just, these are very general, sort of suggestions, but I think they're valid. And then, to try to leverage the region for what it has. It has a lower cost structure, has great talent. So although even if you're raising money in the U.S., try to keep your overhead low by again, kind of leveraging the region as much as you can.
Why did you pick this business to start rather than a different business to start when you were in Venezuela in the student apartment?
It's sort of serendipity / my playing on my strengths. I had traveled a lot. I could, understood the importance of languages, had the sort of I spoke English. I just a number of different things led to it. And I had started this business out of school that again, I could co-found it, and again, we taught English to executives at Fortune 500 companies, and so I understood that very well. So I think one tip for entrepreneurs is if you're in the idea phase, try to build something that plays off of your strengths. You need a story that makes sense, and so this story of, hey, I had an offline business and I'm transitioning online, there's a big opportunity for it. That makes sense. Whereas if you sort of many entrepreneurs I meet, they just try to sort of copy paste ideas that work in the U.S. They try to take them to LatAm, but they have no relevant expertise or experience in that field, and so that's a little bit of a harder story to tell.
In preparing for this, I watched one of your interviews when you were in Chile, and you talked about one of the advantages of potentially starting a business in Latin America. And I'm talking about Open English, that if people in the U.S. had to learn English, someone would have started this many times over. Can you talk about why that might be an advantage for LatAm?
Yeah, I think probably what I was referring to is just the fact that they do say hey, why didn't somebody think about this before, right? It's such a an obvious thing. You teach English online with native instructors for LatAm. It's wow, obvious. And I do think that probably again, if there would have been a lot more capital, there would have been a more active venture capital space in Latin America that would have happened. We were sort of one of the first to make that move 10 years ago to build a digital technology company. And if this was a need for sort of general market America, right, it would have probably gotten done already. But we were at the right time, at the right place, and were able to create this. And then since then, have tried to stay very innovative and trying to identify what are those needs of the Latin American consumer, and our passion and what gets us out of bed every day is just that we want to help people be successful. And so whether it be English as a stepping stone to success, whether it be digital skills like we have at Next U, we have 24 careers that will take you from being an Uber driver to being a digital marketer, a web developer, a programmer, and on top of that English, and all of a sudden you went from Uber driver to being a bilingual web developer, and you can earn many times more for your family than you did before, right? So I think those are the things that get us excited. And now as we explore and have built or acquired businesses in more the junior space for consumer, that's exciting too, because we can affect these lives in a positive way from earlier on.
What was the inflection point for Open English when you knew it was going to be successful?
I still don't. No. Look, I think as an entrepreneur, it's funny. I think obviously, we've gotten a very long way. It's, the brand is incredibly well recognized, and we have a big business. But at the same time, you don't wake up thinking about that. You wake up thinking about the 10 challenges you have ahead of you that day, or that quarter, or that year, right? And so, I think with new opportunities come new challenges, and I think you continue to be more ambitious about sort of what you want to attain and reach, and as a result, you as an entrepreneur, you're always thinking about what's next, and what's the next challenge you're going to solve within the company, right? So, I think there's still a lot of exciting things at Open Education that we're doing that will continue to make this an interesting story.
So some of the things that you're doing seem to have parallels in markets like China, where online education is a lot more developed than, say, the U.S. Do you have any inspiration from what's going on in China, or do you see parallels to what you guys are doing?
Well, interestingly, we started Open English before that whole craze in China, happened around English. I sort of wish we would have been able to crack that market or been earlier on there. It's very hard to go into China, frankly, and a lot of the internet companies that Facebook, Google, Instagram, so you just haven't been able to find the right model, the right partners to do that effectively. So as a result, we didn't do it. We focused really on on what we understood, which were, the emerging markets space outside of China with a focus in Latin America. And that has, I think we have a good advantage there. But over time, I do. Last year, I probably traveled to China 3-4 times, and I am very much in touch with what's happening there. And I think there's a sharing of ideas between both markets. It's a market that's further along, for example, in the junior segment. That's something that's really booming there. It is more behind, interestingly, perhaps in the digital skills segment than what we're seeing in the U.S. or in Latin America. And so, it's just you're always learning, I think, from those different models.
Speaking about learning, if you could go back to when you started the company, knowing what you know today, what advice would you give yourself?
Gosh, I think it's just keep going. It's keep persevering, and don't quit, and just be very thoughtful about every move you make. Build great teams, because it's all about the people that really you surround yourself with, and keep your overhead low, because it's always going to take a lot longer than you think to get to the outcome that you need. And so just give yourself the runway and the time to pivot and experiment.
And how long have you been based in Miami?
Gosh, it's now been like 7 years. So after a few years in California, decided it made a lot more sense running a business that was primarily in Latin America to be in Miami and not have to fly kind of West Coast, East Coast, then down south.
And what are some of the advantages other than just travel times of being here?
I mean, there's geographic for sure, but also the talent. So you can find, I think, the talent that is here in Miami understands Latin America. There's a lot of Latin American talent in Miami that understands the region, whether it be technical. So there's been a lot of American companies that have their South America hubs in Miami, so you can find great finance and admin and advertising, marketing talent that understands the region at scale. And we can hire from that. So that's been we have a team here in Miami that's very talented.
Between OpenEducation and you've both been supporting the ecosystem in Latin America through investments, through helping the ecosystem. Why is that important, and how do you see that ecosystem growing over the next few years?
Yeah, no, that's one of my big passions. I've done that in a few different ways. So I joined the board of Endeavor Miami as we got that off the ground. So Endeavor, if you're familiar, is an organization that's helping promote entrepreneurs that are at that tipping point of really being successful and scaling their businesses. And so we help identify these entrepreneurs and support them as they scale their businesses. And so there's that angle. And I work with Endeavor and try to support Endeavor regionally. I'm going to an event now in October, kind of as a speaker to take some of those learnings down to Chile, for example. And so that's one way. The other way is I have my own separate organization called Éxito, which is success in Spanish, that really it's an event and consulting company for entrepreneurs in the region. And so last year we did 10 events telling the story of the company, how we started it, the lessons learned, a lot of the questions you're asking, but in a formal kind of one day, a very exciting, fun event, packed with a lot of energy and cool people that participate. And we did it with over 10,000 people across the region last year. So I think we're happy to see the kind of the message get across. And now we offer also, we consult with some of those startups so that we help them be successful. So those are some of the initiatives that I'm involved in. At OpenEducation level, for example, we actually have a course on entrepreneurship that we teach. So that is our lessons learned, and we sell that through NextU. So we have a lot of different things. It's very important. I mean, look, having been through it myself, it's really, this is a business that it would feel really, it's just such an honor for us and to be in this position where we've now taught over 600,000 people, whether it be languages or a digital skill, and help them get to a better career, better place. And so that impact that we were able to make is because we were giving them, we were sort of found the opportunities to grow this company. We employ over 1,000 people, so that's also, there's a positive impact there as well. And so look, I think as these companies become successful, I think more and more companies will come of it. There are probably 3 or 4 other companies that have spawned out, no more, I guess, if you consider others that have already left the company. I'd say that there's probably a dozen or so companies that have former executives in management positions here that have left to start interesting things. And so I think, again, that sort of, that ecosystem that forms from people that have now the experience to start a business and grow it, I think that's valuable. So that's the footprint that we want to leave.
And if people want to find out more about you and Open Education, where can they go?
Well, I mean, depending on what interest they have, I have my own website, andresmoreno.com, and you can, follow on Facebook, Instagram, of course, and you can find it there on the website. Or if you want to learn more about Open Education, you can go to our portals, OpenEnglish.com, nextu.com, OpenEnglishJr.com, and so on.
Perfect. Well, thanks for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of Crossing Borders with my guest, Andres Moreno. If you did, please be sure to share it with one friend who you think might like it, whether that's via email, WhatsApp, social media, or smoke signals. Any way helps to spread the word about what's happening in Latin America. Thanks to Nancy Pellegrin for helping set up our conversation, and for Angel and Sofia from the Magma team for doing the post-production. Thanks again for listening, and have a great rest of your day.